All right, so in this episode, we are going to chat about a question that we're bandying around because we haven't met for a couple of weeks. Everyone's been ill, or we've had kid duty and all sorts of things, right? And one of the things that came up from us chatting recently was, how does one create an efficient business? Right? An efficient business being, and then that's where we both were like, oh, well, I think an efficient business is this, and I think an efficient business is this. And actually, I think it's worth in this episode is just challenging, what does that even mean? What is an efficient business? And talk about probably what I imagine what's going to come out of this, Sam, as we chat, is talking about different types of businesses, the different wants and needs people have about putting a business together, and then actually how you make money, right? Because that's also another way of thinking about what an efficient business is.
I think it's good, like, if we pick away at like why we started asking this question, because you and I were both business owners and we were talking about optimizing our existing operations. And probably a lot of people listening have a business or maybe a side hustle, and they're trying to make that work without questioning why make that work. And should you be optimizing that, or should you be going in a different direction? Because I myself have found myself looking at this kind of at a crossroads, like, okay, I've got a thing that makes some money. Do I double down on that and make it make a load of money? Or actually, do I harness all those skills and go over here? Is that a better direction? And so what we were saying just before we came on is I was saying, well, it's a bit of a question to say what's an efficient business, because you need to really define what you want as a person. Like, forget the business. Like, how much money do you want? How much time have you got to devote to put into this thing? Like, what's important to you? Like, you and I have both got a family, and family life is really important, and not being stressed in those times is really important. Like, so, taking client calls in the evenings and the mornings is not ideal. Like, we both do it, but that's not really what we choose to do, given the option. And then, a lot of people, there's a big movement at the moment of people that are doing the slow madding and nomading, where they're traveling. Like, do you want to be location independent? Do you want a physical product business? Do you want to make stuff? Do you just want something that just makes you cash? Like, there's all these questions to answer, because otherwise you just get response like in a coaching scenario where you go, well, it depends. Like, an efficient business, it depends. And it's like, no, you got to optimize for something. But I think it always comes back to you're measuring time and money, like money out for time in, basically.
Yeah, right. So when you look at the definition of efficient, right, it's a system or a machine achieving maximum productivity with minimum wasted effort or expense, right? That's the definition. But the why behind it, well, why do you want a system or a machine achieving maximum productivity, is, and when we bring this up again and again when we chat about this, is so that you don't have to work as many hours in your business, so that you can get more money for less effort. Then the why behind that, well, why do you want to work less hours? Why do you want more money for less effort? That's where the interesting part kind of comes into play here, because a lot of people work for money so they can have a nice life, right? Or you'd hope that. They work for money so they can pursue hobbies, have a family, go on lovely trips abroad, whatever. Some people, though, to be fair, like doing the job, right? They're creatives, they're artisans, they feel compelled to help, to want to do the thing that they're doing. And that's what drives them. And some people just want a job, right?
I think it's really important to dig into that a little bit, because we spoke the other week about risk. And whenever I talk about business stuff, and the growth of business and new ventures and whatever with my wife, she just can't hear it. She doesn't want it, because for her, the number one priority is safety, security, stability. And I would, as most people would probably think, that's a paradigm. Like, there is a paradigm that there are jobs that are safe and work that is safe. And it's a social, economic feeling that you're getting. And I think it's really important to address that, because fear and the way we feel is ultimately what drives us to do things. And I believe, certainly for myself, it's the number one thing that holds you back, that drives your decision making. So I think it's really important to say, it's okay to say, well, I want to feel a certain way from this. Like, because you could go rob a bank. Like, that's really efficient. It's like an hour's work, shotgun, walk it. I don't know if, and I don't know how high your success rate is. But I imagine there's quite a few cons, apart from like socially, that's not acceptable. And you then will have all those feelings.
Against the law. Yes.
Yeah, well, yeah, but like that, again, against the law, what does that actually mean? Well, it means someone's going to go and put you in prison, but you get all those feelings because of the fear of the result. And you could get all those same feelings, like you could have that same emotional response from opening a chip shop on the corner, like, oh, what if I give someone food poisoning? What if they die? Like, what if everyone hates me? What if I can't do it? Like, I could end up in prison. Like, you could still map that same response. And maybe that's a bit extreme, but I think that's really important to consider.
Okay, so with that in mind then, it might be worth looking at different businesses and different business types and kind of looking at the efficiency around them. And I've got some really interesting things to bring to the table here, and I'm pretty sure you have as well.
Hit us with it.
I'm going to talk about some normal businesses first, right? But it's funny that you should mention criminality, right? Because I watched a thing this week that was on Lad Bible about a guy called Max the Forger who knew the craze. I don't know if you know about him. He's like really dapper, has a cane, like suited and booted, the whole thing. And he was born in Brighton, then went to a children's home and like Bernardo's, and then in his words was like dossing. And Bernardo's gave him the opportunity to learn how to paint. So he used to just like copy paintings and create forgeries. He could do like a Lowry perfectly. And he ended up getting picked up off the street to be a forger. Basically. Yeah,
awesome.
Yeah. Before like the times changed and you can like scientifically date when a painting has been done and things like that. They weren't able to do that like 40, 50 years ago. So he was able to get old canvases, learn techniques to put cracks in them and add bits from the Hoover bag, he said, and then go round to auction houses and basically play them. So, put the paintings in and then go in and scam with, other people to try and drive the price of the auction lots up.
That's unreal.
Yeah. And, like the efficiency there, like he was in and out of prison for forgery. I think he did like 3 or 4 stints, he was saying. But all he would have to do is just get his hands on a canvas. And he was doing it in prison as well, apparently, earning like up to £2,000, which is a lot of money back in the 60s and early 70s, right?
So why does that map for you to an efficient business?
Oh, because that is just taking your pure love of art, your skills. Like he said in the interview at the end, like he feels compelled to do it. Like he has to just create art. And when he's got a canvas in his hands, he said he just can't help himself, right? So for me, that's like the true definition. I mean, there's other more legal jobs that we could talk about, but it's such an interesting story, and I'd recommend anyone just go and look up Max the Forger on YouTube and find out a little bit more about it. But why I think it's the most efficient business is because he genuinely loves it. He would go to prison to do that work. He would happily go to auction houses and risk, being caught. And he was caught a couple of times bidding on his own stuff or whatever, which is why the fraud squad got involved. But it was not an issue for him to get up every day, do the things he did for his love of art. And that really spoke to me. That was like, you would do anything for your love. You would literally do anything. And he did. He risked everything. He said he's fine now for money. He's raised lots of money for charity for Bernardo's, so he's gone good now. But it was just such a pleasure watching him, because it's like I felt really excited for him that he's had this life where he got to do exactly what he wanted to do. That for me was really exciting, yeah.
So where I was very dispassionate at the beginning and said, efficiency is ultimately that trade of time for money, you're saying, no, there's a third metric there. There's a third interface, which is passion, like fulfillment, desire, and that can be a bigger reason as anything. And he's managed to align that trading of time and money with his passion. I guess breaking that down, do we agree that you could achieve that passion, that alignment somewhere else. So you could have this trade for time and money, which is, let's call it compromised. You're doing a job you hate, or you're running a business you hate, but it's such a low cost and it gives you all this availability. Let's say you had 99% of the week available to do whatever the hell you wanted. Is that a worthwhile trade? Or maybe that's a question people need to answer for themselves.
Yeah, like I was watching an interview Gary Vaynerchuk was doing on his channel yesterday, day before, and he was doing a very specific interview with someone who works on Madison Avenue. So it was all about the ad industry, and he said this really interesting thing, which was he was at a meeting, maybe down in Cannes, talking to leaders or agency reps of particularly boring businesses. And he said to them, "Why are you doing this? Like, why are you selling this?" And he didn't say the businesses specifically who they were, but I imagine, they were selling finance or something really dry. Like, I remember working in an e-commerce agency with a business who sold incontinence products for old people's homes. And, everyone kind of they did their jobs, but I don't think anyone went home and they were like, "Oh yay, like we managed to get a big order into so and so's old people's homes today." Like, and then, there was another one who sold cleaning equipment, industrial cleaning equipment as well. Like, those are the jobs I look at people doing those. I think you must be doing that because the profit margins are there and it's paying you to have a really lovely double holiday every year.
I think as well, like a lot of people get fulfillment from the operations, from the doing, from being busy day to day. I want to just go back to this dude that was doing forgeries and his artwork. I want to just break down the anatomy of why that worked. So he had, as they will say in The Wolf of Wall Street, it's all about supply and demand. Sell me this pen. There was demand there. There's demand, a preconceived value is already set for this thing, which he's faking, okay? So we don't condone that. Don't go forward things. But there is demand out there. There is a value set for the thing you can do. He has the ability to supply as well. Very niche skill. So the value is already set. So he's spent all this time learning, non-value added. It didn't result. His learning will have not resulted in anything. It's only those pieces that he produced. So if we were to wet finger in the air, like, what sort of time do you think is involved in pulling that off for one forgery?
Well, I think he was saying, like, when he did a 6-month stint, he was able to produce like 4 or 5 pieces.
So if we said one a month, what's the sort of value of something like that? I've no idea.
Yeah, well, at the time, I think he was making like £1,000 or £2,000 per forgery. So that specifically is a lot of money back in the 1960s and 70s.
At the moment, that's probably going to be worth £10 million, I would say.
What he would do, Sam, is do forgeries of not very well-known artists or up-and-coming, in terms of being collected. So he did a copy of Christ by Caravaggio, which was just stunning, really amazing painting, right? But he wouldn't have put that out into the market because that was too good to be true. He did kind of lesser known artists that would still earn him enough money. So, I guess to reflect it to today, he wouldn't necessarily be doing a Banksy, right, and trying to forge a Banksy. It would probably be someone who's in your local high street dealership art gallery instead, who's probably very well known, right?
So he's, let's turn it into academic business terms. He's managing his risk profile. I don't want to be up here with the top performing paintings because that's going to get a lot of scrutiny. Everyone knows that there's only a couple of those. I'm going to go somewhere in the middle of the pack. And then I think the other thing that stands out from your story is he's taken a skill that he's developed, a niche skill that he has some proprietary knowledge on, and he's leveraged that. And I think it's probably fair to say most people, when they start out, they either develop a skill and an interest in an area and then go and work in that area, or they carry it over from, whether a fate, whether it's their life choices has taken them. Like I ended up in engineering partly through choice and whatever else, but that's kind of like my area of expertise now. That's what I go and talk about a lot. So I think it's probably good. You did sales, marketing, like you've always done that, and now you have an agency. Like,
yeah, I haven't deviated massively in 20 years, if I'm honest. There was always something, I always wanted to do publishing and advertising and that type of thing. I think the only thing about Max the Forger I'd say that isn't efficient is the risk is so high that you can go to prison. And also, after a set amount of times going to prison and being caught, you get known for what you're doing. So, either he trains other people up or other people have to go and do the dealing for him or whatever. So, crime does pay to a point here, but, the efficiency, all you need is canvas, skills, paint, and the market need. And he had all of those.
Low startup cost.
Yeah.
Right, okay, I've got a business, I'm going to throw one in that's at the other end of the spectrum, zero passion and all about the profit. But before I do, I can't find the article, so sorry, it's going to be 50% fact, 50% made up, this story. There is the AI tool for creating images, DALL-E, and there's others out there as well, using GTP3. And I read a story the other day of someone asked DALL-E to create Starry Night for them, which is obviously a very famous painting, very desirable. And the output of DALL-E is yours. You own it once it comes out, and it's only done once. And so they framed it up, canvassed it up, stuck it on Etsy, around about 50 quid. Pretty good because you're not licensing the original. And they sold thousands. I worked it out, it's about £2 or £3 million they made. I can't find it. So numbers may be slightly off, give or take 100%. But I was very impressed. So today you don't have to create forgeries. You can just create lookalikes and go sell them as NFTs or on Etsy or wherever else, if you so desire.
I think that would blow Max the Forger's mind, really, wouldn't it? So
AI is going to take everybody's jobs. I'm certain of it. Right. Boring business. I'm going to go the other end. So I've looked into this because it interests me. I like physically being able to touch stuff. I like being able to see the stuff, and I like to be able to do the maths in my head.
You're a hands-on man.
Yeah, I like the idea of I physically have a thing. It cost me less than I can sell it for. Like, I love the idea of that. And the one that I've looked at multiple times and has since actually gone a bit trendy on the internet, which makes me dislike it, which probably says something about my personality. Vending machines. You can buy a vending machine in the UK for £1,500 to £2,000. You can stick a card reader in it for £150. And then there is some software, which is about £100 a month to allow you to manage the stock. So your startup cost there is stock, which you can get from Costco or somewhere else, mark it up. So your startup cost for one vending machine, you're looking around about £3,000 to £4,000, depending on how much you stock it with and where you place it. You've then got to go and find somewhere to put it. And that's the crucial bit on your payback. So the numbers I've found is there's a venue that needs one of these. They get 1,000 people a month. They've got 10 venues. So I've got an average margin of £1, which may or may not be right. Who knows? Assuming that everyone's going to buy. So I've said a payback of about £1,000 a month. Probably a bit optimistic. You could halve that. We're looking at, let's call it, £3,000 to install a venue, 3 months payback time. So within 12 months, you'll have made £9,000 on your vending machine in a venue, less your time and effort to fill it up. So there's some labour there. 10 of those, that's 90 grand a year. That's nearly a six-figure business, assuming my numbers are right and assuming that you can get the stock and logistics and all the rest of it.
That is really interesting you say this, right? Because I am the daughter of entrepreneurs, so it's always run in the family. And back in the 90s, my parents invested in like a bunch of vending machines. But this is the 90s, right? So it wasn't electronic. It was basically, coin operated. So you put the coins in, switch them, and then the food would be released, like the confectionery and stuff. So they got a Costco or whatever the equivalent was back in the 90s. So they were able to buy crisps and chocolate and snacks and flapjacks and all sorts of things like that at like a wholesale rate, and then put that markup in the vending machine. And then they were able to place the vending machines into factories, warehouses, that type of thing. The reason they stopped doing it, right, and they weren't aware this would be such a problem, is that people who worked at the venues, especially at night, so night shift people, factory workers and stuff, would just tip the vending machines over and then just stick their hands up and rob it, basically. So they'd go to fill up the vending machine like twice a week or whatever it was on their rounds, and it would just be, or they'd get a call from like the facilities manager or whatever saying, your vending machine's been tipped over. And they tried to resolve it, but there was just nothing like free chocolate that inspires people to push a vending machine over.
I totally get that. So let's play this out a little bit. So I've mapped this out in an Excel spreadsheet, and I said, okay, 10 vending machines, all within a similar location for this particular project. I think you could fill that up in a day, a 10-hour day, an hour vending machine. That seems reasonable for travel time and everything else. And there's some fuel in there. So you're talking 10 hours a week of effort for your 90, 100 grand a year. The hardest part is location, and that location has all of these attributes, security and everything else. Now, the other thing that these particular ones need, because they've got the card reader, is internet. So I then said, okay, well, you can get these internet boxes that take a SIM card for £10 a month. That would do. I think, well, if you're going to do that, you could stick a security Wi-Fi camera in there, because I thought exactly that. I've worked in factories and assembly halls and things, and I've seen what goes on. People make keys and whatever else. I thought a camera would be a good enough deterrent. But then I thought, well, what's the upsell here? Well, there's an advertising opportunity there. You've got some advertising space, so you can stick a TV on. And then I went down a bit of a rabbit hole on this, because it genuinely interests me, because I love cash flowy businesses. There's nothing better. Like, I used to buy and sell cars when I was a teenager, and I had an eBay business. There's nothing better than someone handing you real cash for your hard work and sweat. Like, I've taken cars apart, put them back together, polished them to death, and then someone would give me some money. And I love that. I love the real money bit.
You like the flicking of the notes off a roll like that too?
My goal was always to be dealing enough cash that you know when you see people counting money really quick, like a bank teller, bam, 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 bam. I could never get that quick. So anyway, I went down a rabbit hole. I was like, what else would people pay for? And I started looking at classic arcade machines. Now, this is where it gets a bit more complicated, because actually about a third of the startup cost, you're only looking at about £700 or £800 to buy one of these arcade machines. And anyone that's a geek out there, very easy to build with a Raspberry Pi, should you so desire. I worked out on the back of an envelope to build one would probably cost you about 600 quid with a card reader. Now, all the ones online that I was looking at didn't actually have a card reader on. So I started Googling, well, why is this? And are there any gambling regulations? Now, I don't know. I couldn't figure this out. Maybe someone else out there knows. Maybe Vicky, you know. It seemed maybe this is a category D gambling machine, which is general family purpose, but there's no reward, there's no payout. So I don't know what the answer is there, but the category it's in, the licenses, it seems to be the same as pool tables, where you pay £1 to pay for a pool table, seemed in that category. And again, I thought, that's probably a nice little earner as well. It's the sort of place that would have a vending machine, would probably have an arcade, chip shops, that kind of place, gyms, small bars, working men's clubs. The hard part seems to be the location, finding somewhere to put it that's got traffic. And also then you're going to have to negotiate. Presumably they're not going to let you put it there for free unless you can sell it so well that you explain, this is some enhancement of your working area, unless this is such small fry to them that they're not bothered.
Well, you need a permit from the local licensing authority in order to have one of these. So that's the friction there, is that if you have a larger arcade with lots of game machines in there, you need a gambling commission license. So
okay, so some barrier to entry there, but I can imagine you're talking in the hundreds of pounds there. Fill out the forms, and either you get it or you don't get it. But then you're 100% profit on that. Like there's no stock cost. It's just money.
Okay, but the human side of it, away from the spreadsheet and looking at human behaviour, is that you're going to have the same kids coming to your arcade, the hustling kids. You're going to have parents coming accusing you of taking their kids away from homework and why are they here, not at home, And also when you have gangs of kids, you have a responsibility to watch out for, other issues that might, that kind of might be related to having, kids, underage kids around, you have to look out for safety and child protection and all of those things as well. It's not just getting people in front of game machines and getting them to pay, unless they're adults and you do that in a bar setting or whatever. But I think we can look back at the 80s and learn some things there, can't we?
Yeah, for sure. I'm not saying this is a beautiful business or a perfect business, or there aren't some rough edges that need shaving off. I'm just there saying, for me, I was looking at that thinking, okay, a credit card worth of investment. Let's a 0% credit card, which okay, there's none of that at the moment. Inflation's got through the roof, but give it 6 months. That's going to be on the cards. A 0% credit card for 12 months. You could start that business and you could do it after work alongside whatever else if you can find the location. That is an all about the hustle business. And if that income is going to be enough for you, then potentially that's a good business. But let's talk about the downsides. No freedom of location. Yeah, you've got the risk, but the downside risk is a credit card worth of investment. So you probably flog all the stock again on eBay if you had to, and the machines.
Yeah, I can also see it's the type of place where people using fraudulent credit cards, so you'd have that issue potentially.
Yeah, so I don't know how Stripe or any of the payment processors would deal with that. I don't know if that's your responsibility or not. Couldn't tell you.
Yeah, I mean, Stripe would shut you down. I was working with a client this week, actually, who had their site flooded with orders. And it was really interesting because it was the same low-cost product and they had about 3,000 attempts, right? And apparently Stripe was saying that this is a type of fraudulent activity where they're just testing to see if the cards are viable. And it only takes one or two out of those 3,000 attempts to get through. And because it's such a low amount, clearly this was done by a bot, so we got notified straight away, but it's such a low amount you wouldn't notice normally, and then they can take that card away and spend more on it. So I do wonder whether arcade type situations are the sort of magnets for fraudulent activity as well.
Okay, cool, done that one. Have you got another one?
Yeah, well, I've got a little list here actually of like 3. When I was thinking of profitable businesses, they all came down to cash as well. It's really interesting that you say that. Food trucks apparently are going to be a $6.6 billion industry by 2028, because a third of the cost of bricks and mortar. Again, you could buy your food at wholesale rate and then add that markup on top, and you can go anywhere with your mobile as well.
Before you move on from that one, I've got some inside info on food trucks. I used to run a food truck company. We used to build them and rent them out. So I can give you the inside info. To build the food truck out 5 years ago was about £3,000. And then you're looking at a day labour rate of £120 to £180, depending on how sophisticated it is. You want to go for high margin products. So churros, donuts, coffee, anything like that. You need a certificate from the local food hygiene wallers, hundreds of pounds if anything. You want to do some basic food handling training online in the UK. NCAS, National Catering Association, I think they were called. I think that was like £10 a month or something, and you could do all these certificates online. And then you usually have to pay the venue to be there. So again, startup costs less than £5,000-10,000. But I can tell you the stress was high. Yeah, finding people that you can rely on, that you can go to. Let's just say there's some rules that are a bit difficult, ambiguous. So for instance, if you've got electrical power should be grounded, but food trucks aren't grounded. So what do you do about that? Well, people just don't look at that problem, is the answer. And there's a few rules like that. But yeah, totally with you. It's huge and very profitable and low startup cost.
Okay, so my husband works in the events industry, so he's in that world all the time talking about it. He builds he does the production side, building sets and things like that. But he does have some insight into festival food trucks in particular, and it's a racket apparently. Like,
you pay to be there.
You pay to be there. You pay a big wad of your takings to the festival owners, like say Live Nation, right? And we went to Camp Festival over the summer. Everyone has a card reader, and that card reader, it goes straight to Live Nation. Yeah, so then that's divvied out. But then even just to get on site and sell on the site is a mile-long waiting list. And you have to prove yourself in order to...
Got to grease the wheels to get on.
Yeah. And, you have to know someone who knows someone to even kind of begin that conversation. So if you're like a plucky green, hey, I really love creating churros. Like, I've got the best churros recipe. People are going to love my chocolate, all of the rest of it. And you just go straight into it green, you're going to lose out unless you know people and you know where to go, and you don't piss people off by taking their patch or copying people who are already successful in your area. Like, that, there's the human element there.
Yeah, well, this is where Duncan Bannatyne started, doesn't it, with his ice cream vans?
Oh, I didn't know that. I don't know his story.
Yeah, if you read his autobiography, that's what inspired me, actually.
Oh, was it like a sort of a mafioso ice cream truck business then, was it?
Basically, he said, yeah, it got a bit aggressive, but he was maniacal about stock count and everything else. I think if I was to do that again, there are a few things I'd consider. One would be to start my own event, because that's very low startup costs, but you have got insurance and all the logistics and very stressful. But a lot of time and effort, like we're just talking about the money outcome here. Or if you were just wanting to have a little side gig that was you working, then you go for small events, school fairs, places that are friendly, church fetes, little mothers meetup groups, but you're not going to have the traffic, you're not going to have the margin, but you're not going to have the big risk outlay. So go on, sorry, you were saying car washes as well.
Car washes. I mean, I just think Breaking Bad now when I think car washes. Saul Goodman pitching to Walter White. What a great way of laundering money a car wash is. But just when we're thinking we've moved on from this type of business, it's getting bigger than ever. It's going to be $21 billion industry by 2028, simply because cars are lasting longer now. More of us are leasing cars. We have a better motivation to keep our cars clean, maintain the upkeep, all of that. And that's where car washes come in. It's not just something you do on your drive on a Sunday morning now, it's a thing you go to and you do it there, especially because, people don't live in places where they can perhaps wash their car on their drive, right?
I think anything that's a service-based business, people are typically lazier and less willing to do things. There's a lot of cases of car washes where immigrants are being done over, illegal immigrants are being done over and used as slave labor. But that just tells you that there's opportunity there. Like, it's terrible, the things that happen, but laundrettes, car washes, window cleaning, vending machines, any of these businesses where people go, that's not a professional business, there's opportunity there. There's real opportunity there.
Yeah, it's quite interesting talking about them as they are efficient businesses in terms of the cash that you can earn, but there's risk with all of those, and they're obviously in person as well. I think there are, for the more modern day entrepreneur, easier things that one can do.
There are. Should we get into them?
Yeah, they're online. What have you got on your list, Sam Jacks?
I've got some inside data on a business that I want to talk about. I'm going to talk about it anonymously. But before we do, I just want to give a bit of a framework to this. We've got different ways of getting the money in. And I know we've kind of covered this before, but I want to reiterate it. You can do a job, which is a fixed amount of income for a fixed amount of time. And there's nice security. Like, I've given you the headlines there. In my head, that's how I think of a job. You can do a joint venture. A type of joint venture is sales. So there, quite often you have a fixed amount of time with an unlimited amount of upside because you're on commission. And the salespeople are often, people turn their nose up at them, but they're some of the highest earners. I know a guy who sells IT, corporate IT, never at home, works very hard, but he's doing £250,000 a year because you're typically looking at 5 to 20% commission on your sales, and depending on who you're working for, that's potentially huge. So your ability to deliver on the thing is quite high. But if you don't like sales, if you don't like the products, you've got that time element there. We've got MLMs, multi-level marketing schemes, where essentially you're selling other people's product. Again, super efficient. Someone's found the products, they've sort of secured demand, and MLMs are technically illegal, aren't they? But there is legal ways of doing them. In that vein, affiliate marketing, selling someone else's thing and getting some money back. Anywhere where you can add value and there's already demand, I think is good. You've got the opportunity to franchise a business. Again, someone secured demand, they've figured out the operations, you just go operate. But essentially, the two top categories that I broke this down into was build versus buy. So we've kind of spoke about building something from scratch a lot, and we've spoken about building real businesses. We haven't gone into the digital businesses. I really think we should do a deep dive on digital businesses because I personally, my gut feel, this is Sam Jacks' data says that's where the big, efficient opportunity businesses are. And then if you just want cash and you want to know something's working, if you just are exchanging time for money, I think buying a business is beautiful. And that's what I want to talk about now, if that's okay. So a business in the health and wellness space, turning over about 200K a year, give or take, with about a 50% margin on it. So about 100 to 150k margin in there. So that's earnings, discretionary earnings. Overheads is the person that owns it and one virtual assistant located in the Philippines on about £12,000 a year. Cash flow wise, it's an e-com business. So the stuff's got to be imported and then sold online. So there is the risk there of importing stuff from overseas and exchange rates and whatever else. And essentially this business did run on ad spend, but now it looks on referrals. So people have bought the kit and then are referring out. And he's currently setting the business up to sell it. And the sale price that's been banded around is going to see him walking away with over £1 million. And that's because the business is so lean, because there are so few overheads, because the brand is established, and it's not his brand. He hasn't built the brand from scratch. He's licensed someone else's brand, licensed their equipment. So it's essentially a franchise, a license deal, a bit more complicated. Don't know what the startup costs were for that, but it takes him 5-10 hours a week to operate. He could outsource that and take a haircut. He could bring someone in on 20-30 grand a year and just be the business owner. And this is a set of real figures for a real business that exists. It's drop shipping, essentially, equipment. He owns all the licensing, all the digital assets, and it's a decent wedge that he's going to walk away with, having built this business up from nothing. Startup costs, if I was to guess, around 50 or 100 grand to get going, done on a business loan. Not obscene. I think he probably could have started with a lot less, 10, 20 grand. I suspect he may have done, but I don't know for sure. And the reason I just wanted to highlight this is if you were to buy that business at £1 million, after 5-ish years, and at the moment he's not doing anything to grow this business, so let's just be really clear. He's just sat on it. If you were to grow this business, I think your return would be 4 or 5 years. You'll have taken debt to buy it, so the money you're earning is going to increase in value, whereas the debt, it will be, well, debt's getting a bit expensive at the moment, but your earnings will outperform the value of the debt. So you're talking 4 or 5 years, and after that 4 or 5 years, you've got the £1 million asset still, probably worth more if you've grown it. Plus, you're talking a couple £100,000 a year income.
Yeah. So there's an earn out there basically in order to recoup his cash, right?
No, so he's selling. If you were to, I'm highlighting this business as sort of figures that exist for this business, for this e-com business. You could go and buy this business, is the point I'm making. Rather than we've been talking about, scrappy, spend 5 or 10 grand and build something from scratch. I'm saying on Angel List, on Micro Acquire, elsewhere, there are businesses that range from about £10,000 to a couple £100,000 to £1 million. About £1 million is the top end. You could buy and you will get a cash flowing business. It works already. All the cogs are turning. You've just got to keep pouring on the oil.
Yeah. So buying straight into an already efficient business here, right? So it's all on paper. Okay, this is the value. This is what I'm going to get out. The system's already in place. So it's all up to you once you purchase that.
Not necessarily efficient. I think that's the point I'm trying to make, is you could buy a business that's operating, that's going to give you the cash that you want, and then you could sprinkle on your efficiency nuggets and improve that margin, potentially grow the business. Like if all the things that we talk about through automation, outsourcing, delegating, you could leverage your skills in this business to make it worth more money. But from day one, it's throwing off cash. And if you can use someone else's cash to buy it, then you quit in, because you're just essentially getting paid and owning the business. You've got all the autonomy. If it's an e-com business, you can have physical location freedom, just as an option.
Yeah, I think, the benefit, I guess, of buying a business is that the seller has to go to great lengths in order to show you how you can make cash, right? And how it works. And there's definitely something in there, because you wouldn't necessarily know that if you were starting a business from scratch. You'd be sucking it and see, right? But, finding a business to buy where you don't have to do extra work. I mean, that's kind of where we're sort of coming back to the start of the episode topic again, isn't it? It's what business would one want to buy where you don't want to like gain a job as well? You know, if I was buying a business, I'd be looking at what can I invest and do the least amount of work in order to earn another stream of revenue, right? I guess like the same would be for you as well if you were looking to buy a business.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. So let's just assume that there's a way of raising capital, whether that's seller financing. So that just for clarity on what that means, if anyone's unfamiliar with it, let's say the business has been sold for 100 grand. You say to the seller, okay, I'll give you 20 grand up front, and then there'll be a handover period of 12 months, 2 years. And over that 12 months to 2 years, I'll use the cash flow to pay you out. And they'll take that because they've no longer got the liability. You are definitely going to pay them that money, and they can do the handover. So to get to your point of, okay, you don't want to buy a job, there are loads of these businesses that are operating already, and quite often owner operator in there. And the reason the margin isn't in there is because they've kind of just lost the steam, run out of energy to remove themselves from the business. It's easier for them to do it all. So in that scenario, let's say this particular scenario, you could employ someone perfectly capable on 50, 60 grand a year to go and operate his business. You say to him, okay, there's going to be a 12 month handover period. And during that 12 months, I'm going to sit in once a month. I want this report doing. I want these metrics doing. This new person I brought in is going to run the business and operate it. You're going to give them everything they need to operate it and hold their hand for 12 months. And I'm just going to do a quality check on it. And and you can even put a clause in there. If after 12 months this person hasn't managed to hand it over and they can't work a week without you, then I'm not buying it. And you know that you can negotiate these kinds of deals right down to there's other businesses that are sort of £10,000, that online businesses that where you've got a website or social media profiles or something that gets traffic, gets footfall, digital footfall, and they're selling a digital product, and there's basically supply and demand there, and that's what you're buying, and you can say, okay, well, I could increase, just double the price of the thing that's been sold, and maybe we'll see a little dip off on purchase, but I'm going to get more revenue out of it. And so I think it'd be good now to just break down the anatomy of these things that we're talking about, why it's beneficial to buy versus build. I think it'd be good to break that down a bit.
Yeah, well, I think it's like why anyone who is a professional board seat person does what they do, right? Because it's like you're a kind of a timeshare for your expertise. So, if you can invest a little bit into multiple businesses, but be able to draw out cash from those businesses just by having a board seat and being able to make decisions at the top level and not at the doing, like that seems incredibly efficient, like an incredible thing to do. And you can see why people do that. They become angel investors and they want to sit on the board.
I think we should talk about that. Like because angel investing, you're talking about making 25, well, they reckon you do need to do a minimum of 25 bets to be getting any ROI. Typically, what one investment returns the whole fund. So what are the returns because angel investing, depending on how you do it, you need a decent chunk of cash. Invest in the stock market, you're looking at returns of 9% less inflation, typically. So I think it'd be really good to say, buying a business, what are the returns we're looking for there? Like what should be your wet finger in the air, back of a fag packet? What multiple do you need off your investment?
Well, again, I think this just comes back to what you want to do. Like I had someone in my membership, she's still in there actually. She bought a business, a few years ago that sells live pesticides.
Okay.
Yeah, so she imports them from a supplier. She sells them to gardeners. They're much better than putting chemicals on your plants and everything. Obviously, there's risk there because the product can perish after a set amount of days or whatever. And also you can't post. There's certain things you can't do in terms of postage and things like that as well. But that was not her background. She just wanted a business that fit in around her life. She still has baby twins at the time, And that was a business that fit in around her life that had proof of profitability. So all she had to do was just take that management on. Whereas I couldn't think of anything worse than handling live insects and that type of thing. I couldn't see myself doing that. If I was to buy a business where I had to be hands-on, I'd want to do something I loved. I'd want to do something that I was genuinely interested in. A la the sales example you talked about earlier on in the episode. I do believe if you sell something, you have to believe in it, because people can smell it a mile off when you don't believe in the product that you're selling. If you are just doing it for the cash, the returns have got to be really good there. You've got to look at the spreadsheet and go, yeah, if I put my money in, I know I'm going to get this amount out, and then look at the time that you need to spend on that happening and kind of weigh it up. It just always comes back down to that time versus cash output benefit again, and that's going to be personal for every person. I wouldn't want to buy a vending machine business, and have to go around putting the vending machines into places, whereas I would happily invest in an online store, a drop shipping store with a product that I really liked.
Why?
Because time is probably the kind of the biggest chip I've got in my sort of bargaining bucket, if you like. I have very limited time because I have a family and children, and I do primary childcare, so I take them to school, pick them up, because I'm an events widow. So I do a lot of the looking after my kids. So if I have, and I can't rely on childcare to do that always. So if that takes me away from that part of my life, which I really wanted to do, then it's not going to work for me. Like, I could go and get a job up in London right now. It pays me 100k a year. I'm pretty sure I could easily do that tomorrow. But then that means I have to get on a train up to 4 hours a day. I have to rely more on childcare, and so those factors would inform any decision I make about any business I invest in or job that I did. How about you?
So I have some firm beliefs on this. In fact, the Bible, Tim Ferriss, 4 Hour Work Week, has some really good guidance on this. Step one is to do your dream line, as he describes it, which is to map out how you want life to be and how much it costs. So if you want a Ferrari, how much is that per month? If you want to live in a certain house, freedom of location, you write all these things down, basically. And then that gives you the framework. And he basically says, build a muse, that's what he calls it, build a business that is just for throwing off cash. That's all it exists for. Not to say that you are going to sit on your arse for the other 36 hours a week, because he in his 4 hour work week.
The so-called passive income business.
Yeah, but I'm all about that. Okay, yeah, so there's 100 hours, 200 hours, 1,000 hours to get it built to begin with. Or maybe there's cash. But once it's built, the maintenance of it is low. And I think that's the important thing. Building might be really difficult. Building these systems might be really difficult. So some rough rules of thumb that I try to work by. Because I have a few passion projects, which I don't know if they're going to make money. But I want to do them. I want to build an aerospace company that makes jets and vertical takeoff vehicles. I want to do that. I'm sure there'll be some money to be made, but I don't want to have to. I just want to go and geek out in the engineering the same way you want to go and make music. And there's a lot of engineering stuff where I'm like, I just want to do the engineering and not think about the money. So in the camp of just have cash, a business that throws off cash, it's got to be a 10x return minimum, in my mind, because otherwise stick it in the stock market, stick it in someone else's investment. If you're going to buy a business or start a business, there's got to be a route to a clear 10x return, and it's got to keep throwing cash off afterwards. Time commitment, I'm happy to pay for someone else's time rather than my own, because I haven't got more time to spend. Like, I'm already 100% committed. I can design and I can orchestrate, but I can't commit to the building. So it has to be something that I can outsource, which leads me to, it doesn't matter whether it's a passion project or a business to throw off cash. What you have to fundamentally be able to do, let's take the vending machine business as an example, is write down all of the tasks that need doing. You've got employee Joe. Joe's going to go and fill up the vending machine for you. Okay, Joe, well, here's the keys to the van. Have you got a driver's license? Here's the route. Here's the best route. This is how you fill it up. This is how you take stock. This is how you do date rotation, blah, blah, blah. And you have to empower Joe to do all of that for you and exchange the money. And then all you are responsible for is the ownership of the system. And the system includes all the business operations, accounting, software, buying stock, the van, Joe, the vending machines, stock, all of that. You are just the ownership, and all you are doing is being responsible for the arbitrage of all those things, which cost less than the sum of money that you get for operating all those things and owning that risk. And I am totally into that and think it's a totally acceptable and probably a very sensible place to start. And this happens and isn't really spoken about in the entrepreneurial world as well. When founders are raising millions of pounds to start these moonshot businesses, quite often what will also happen is they will get, I think it's secondary stock, or they will get a little bit of their own personal stock bought, so they get cash in their pocket, so that the cash is taken off the table. So they have the headspace, they have the emotional space, they have the freedom to do the creative bit. And I think that's ultimately what an entrepreneur is, that it's the intersection of art and science, business and actual science, and you can only really do that if you're free, and freedom, has a price one way or another. So I think the thing to do is get the cash, take the bag, and be safe, and whatever that means. And so I don't care is the short answer. Don't care what the cash flow business is. I'm building a couple at the moment. I think that's a good place to start, personally.
Yeah, I mean, I won't lie. I've gone back to the idea of having a passive income biz again, and I've decided to reignite my membership business for 2023. There is, just to be clear, it's not pure passive income. Like, I have to show up and do a set amount of content for it every week. But, to kind of go back to our forger at the start of the episode, I love doing that. So I'm going to find that like really easy too. But yeah, there's definitely something to kind of be said for going down that road for that type of business. And Bernard Marr is the futurist I was researching. Well worth a look, and Google and kind of read a bit more about him. One of the businesses that he was talking about, which is just super efficient, super profitable, we should all be going down that road, is a business of servitization, which basically is a subscription business, right? So Netflix versus Disney, Dollar Shave Club versus Gillette, because if you can get people into a habit of buying a product, buying a service or whatever on a kind of subscription basis, you can create a lifetime value there. You can not always have to show up every single month the same level. It might be different every single month. And that's from a service-based business point of view, like I'm going to be doing. If you're just selling a product, then you've just got guaranteed sales basically for as long as the subscription lasts for. So
yeah, so you're looking at lifetime value and recurring custom, or how you can get footfall.
I mean, that's so efficient, right? Because you won't have to spend on putting leads into the top of the funnel then, or as much, if you can guarantee the retention of your customers.
Yeah, I think we need to do maybe a part 2 on this at some point and break down the metrics bit of it, because we haven't spoken about like K factor. If something's viral, then you've got no ad spend. We haven't spoken about digital businesses and the margins that are in them, drop shipping. Like, we haven't really got into the nitty gritty of this. We're talking very broadly.
We'll come back. I mean, we should be talking about platform-based businesses as well. My agency business is a platform-based business because we rely on Facebook ads, right, or TikTok ads. People who are Uber drivers, people who run Airbnb businesses. Like, I'd love to look at that in a little bit more detail in a future episode as well.
Definitely. Let me finish off with one sort of story that's from a different business, completely different, that we've spoken about before. Found a guy whose brilliant blog post. It was all about how he made £14,000 in 7 days. I went, oh, good on you. Let's have a look at that. And it's 7 steps to how I made it, or some clickbaity title like this. And I broke down step 1. I shared this post on my Twitter profile. And I was like, step 1 is all this article should be about, because essentially he had a PDF, he had a little ebook or a course or something, very easy to build online. Gumroad, Podia, Thinkific, Kajabi, any of those platforms will host it for you. Hell, you could even just send it on an email and use Stripe as just take a payment off people. And step 1 was I shared this post with my Twitter audience. He had 250,000 Twitter followers. I'm like, okay, so you just converted like 1 or 2% of your Twitter followers. Like,
that's your ready to go business there when you've got an audience that big. That grinds my gears, right? When people do that, like, here's how I started my amazing business. It's just, but you've got like 100,000 followers. Of course you were going to make money out of them.
I think a lot of what we talk about is pouring fuel in the tank. Like, what's the best fuel to get the engine really spinning? But a lot of the efficiency is got from looking at the compass and saying, oh, well, it's that direction I want to go in. Like, you could do any of the things we've spoken about, but knowing which direction to go in that has demand. So our forger knew artwork is valuable. Vending machine businesses will only work if there's footfall of hungry people. Like, a catering business is only going to work if there's like a starving audience in place. A digital product is only going to work if you're solving a problem and you can solve that problem in front of people. Your business only works because you've got small businesses that need leads. My business only works because there's people that got a hard problem that need solving and we need to build some electronics or software. Like, it's really important. That is the fundamental thing that all these things have in common. And the challenge is getting that demand for less than, the cost of supply. That's all you're trying to do. And I think maybe that's a good place to wrap it up.
Yeah. Okay, well, let's leave it there. But, I am, just so you know, going to be looking into, on the side, setting up my own car wash business clearly now. So
bucket and a sponge.
Yeah, yes. I could send the children out to do it. There you go. Cheap labour on the neighbourhood. That is the most efficient business. Teach them some entrepreneurial skills. So
I'm totally into that. Totally. Except let's just be clear, we don't promote child labour.
No, I mean, I promote child labour of my own children, but nobody else's. So.